play back in the background there as I introduce our next guest, a man who is in, I believe, his 5th year as the mayor of a council in North West Tasmania, a third-generation farmer, family dating back, I think, in the area's farmers to about 1920. Mad on your footy, mad on your thoroughbred racing. So tell me, how on earth did the community of Derby end up with this world-class facility that you're going to share with us today? Take it away, Greg Howard.
Good afternoon, Lindsay. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to present this afternoon. Well, Derby is a former mining town. It's in the centre of our municipality, which is called Dorset, which covers the majority of the North East of Tasmania, about 3,500 square kilometres. And in its heyday, Derby was a mining town of around 3,000 people. In fact, the largest town in the municipality by a long way. And it was supported by the Bryce's tin mine. And in its heyday, the Bryce's tin mine was, in fact, probably the richest tin mine in the world, to the point where they didn't actually have to wash the tin. When they got to the scene, they just used to shovel it straight into the bag because it was mid 90% purity. Now, all of that came to a sudden halt in 1929 because the water supply, the Cascade Dam, which serviced the mine, burst and flooded the mine and killed a heap of miners and washed away part of the bottom end of the town. So, with no chance of actually being able to pump the water out of the mine, the population just fell away to a few hundred in a matter of a couple of years, and probably just go there we go on that one. So you can see the lake there. That is actually where the original mine was. So that's the mine hole, and that's probably 50 to 80 metres deep in places, and with a huge amount of water running into it, they just couldn't pump it out. So right from that point in time, it stuck at around 500 or 600 people, and then in the mid 70s, when agriculture and forestry, which is basically our two major industries, when they started to become mechanised and the jobs started to disappear, then the town population just gradually dwindled till in the early 2000s, it was down to around 100 people. And in 2012, the town population came to council and said, look, our town's going to die unless you do something. What can you do for us? And right at that point in time, we didn't have an idea, but I suppose coincidentally, the state government had been working on a state cycling strategy, and part of that was mountain biking. And they came up with a bit of a plan where they would build some tracks at a variety of locations across the north and the northeast, and hope people would go from one location to another. And said, are you interested? And we said, well, we're interested, but not in the model that you've got. And we'd be interested if you would locate everything at Derby. Because there's no economic value in people going to remote locations where there's no business to support the tourist activity. So after quite a bit of toing and froing, they finally agreed, and Blue Derby was born. And then in 2015 or 2014, we started construction with a federal government grant and some money from the state government, and the rest of the money coming from the Dorset Council. So that's how the tracks actually got to be at Derby. But why did we pick Derby? Well, Derby, to have a successful mountain bike trails, you need elevation. So it means that mountain bikers like, they're thrill seekers. It's adventure tourism, and they like long thrill-seeking rides down through a variety of forest types and over rocks and anything you can find, and they like jumping, and may surprise you that I didn't take any of those videos that we've just been looking at, because it's way too extreme for me. But so we had that elevation, we had the topography, and where Derby sits at the bottom of the hill. And the good thing about that is that when people finish their rides, they are actually in the town. And when they're in the town and they can just ride to their accommodation, or they can ride to the pub, or they can ride to the pizza parlour, you know you've got them. You know they're going to stick around, and they're going to either stay or they're going to spend money in the town. If they don't finish in the town and they load their bikes up on a car and they have to drive, then you've lost them. So it's really important that, once you've got them, you've got to get the best out of them, as it was. And the average stay for people who come to Derby to ride the trails is around 4 nights. So there's around 100 k's of trail built in and around Derby, and so 4 nights, and that's, you know, that we know we've got them for that period of time, and we try and obviously try and get as much money out of them as we possibly can. The other reasons we chose Derby is that it does have a variety of forest types, and you may have seen briefly in the video that, you know, it ranges from sort of subalpine forests at the top of the hill, and which puts some magnificent views out across the valleys and across the northeast, down through very heavy wet rainforest, and down into the old mine site, which is at the bottom of the hill. So there's plenty of that. It has quite a large number of large granite rocks which serve us well for jumps, and there is one point, and unfortunately I don't have a picture of it, but there's a huge granite rock about 20 metres high that's actually split in two, and you can ride down through the split in the rock, and the gap is just big enough to fit the handlebars of your bike down through there. But if you happen to stuff it up, well, you're going to come a nasty gutser, I can tell you. But it's you know, it's one of the key tourist attractions in the whole trail network to be riding down through a split rock. So the other thing is that to build successful mountain bike trails, you have to build good trails in the first place, and you have to look after them, and they have to be being able to be ridden for most of the year, if not all of the year. And so the soil type around, right from the very top right to the very bottom, is it's a very low erodibility soil, and it's free draining, and it's really high in organic matter, which means that it doesn't wash when we get a rainfall event, and it doesn't go to powder in the middle of summer when it's dry. And one of the other great things about Derby is that it does have a regular rainfall pattern. So, you know, we never get really large rainfall events. I think in the time since 2015, when we opened the trails, the highest daily total of rainfall has been around 40 mils, but the tracks can easily handle that. And in the summertime, when we don't have prolonged dry spells, so normally it would almost rain every week, just a little bit of a shower in Derby, and that keeps the tracks nice and hard and safe to ride on. And there's been a lot of tracks built since Derby, and some of those are going to have trouble because of that reason, where you have a long dry spell and the track goes powdery, and then they become unsafe to ride. So if you want your people to keep coming back, the tracks have got to be fun, but they've got to be safe. You know, you can't afford to be having too many serious injuries, and you will have injuries because, you know, people will misjudge something and hit a tree or hit a rock, and, you know, they'll hurt themselves. But you need to be able to minimise those as much as you possibly can. So what impact did it have on the region? Well, you could have bought the town of Derby for a couple of $1 million back in about 2012, I reckon. The average house value in the town was between $40,000 and $50,000, and a lot you could have bought for less than $20,000. But the average price of the houses in the town at the moment is around $300,000. So it's made a huge impact on the town itself, and certainly it made a bit of a difference to our rates value, I can tell you that much. It's produced for us around 100 jobs, and most of those jobs have gone to local kids who are engaged in the hospitality industry or in the mountain bike tour guides and maintenance and sales and that sort of stuff. And that's good because in that far northeast corner of our municipality, jobs outside of agriculture and forestry were basically non-existent. So people had to leave, kids had to leave the area to go to Launceston or, you know, even to Scottsdale to find work, and that puts pressure on, you know, sporting teams and community groups and clubs and things like that. So to have some employment opportunities actually based in that far northeastern corner is really advantageous for us. And we've, of course, attracted a heap of investment into the town. Airbnbs have just gone through the roof. Before we opened the trails, we were down to a single garage, one cafe, and a couple of pubs who were probably weren't selling a barrel a month, I don't reckon. But now we've got, you know, we've opened up 3 new cafes, a general store, 3 bike hire shops, 4 or 5 shuttle services, and multiple Airbnbs, pizza shops, and the town is really buzzing. And We know that in 2019 we have track counters on the tracks, and we also do exit polls amongst the tourist and accommodation places. So we had around 30,000 visitors to the town in 2019, which is a massive, massive amount of visitors for a little town of still only 100 people. And that has brought about between $15 and $18 million into the North East region, and it's not just all located in Derby. There has been some sharing of that wealth with the other nearby towns in terms of people travelling 4 or 5 k's to the next town for a counter meal, or actually not being able to get accommodation in Derby and actually getting accommodation in those nearby towns. So there's been some flow on from that amount of money. And because a lot of people, especially interstaters and the internationals who come, and that makes up still a significant portion of our riders, and probably around 40% of them, they tend to come to Tasmania for a week, and a lot of them come to Tasmania purely to ride the Derby mountain bike trails. And what they do is they ride the trails, and they usually stay about that 4 or 5 days, but then they tend to tour around the rest of Tasmania and actually spend a bit of time and spend a bit of money in the rest of the state. So, excuse me, there's a benefit of around $12 to $15 million that we know extends to the rest of the state, not necessarily associated with mountain bike riding, but just people just having a look around the rest of the state. And there's plenty to see in Tassie. So, and we have a lot of repeat business, which is really good. So, and even locals, we have a group out of Hobart, about 15 of them, and they literally come to Derby every fortnight to ride the trails. And we have 100 k's of trails, and they probably ride 30 or 40 every time they come. But you'd think they'd get sick of it, but they don't. They keep coming back. It's such a fantastic fun. So what we've been able to do is we attracted a round of what is called the EWS. Now, the EWS is in Enduro World Series, and Enduro World Series is pretty much the World Cup of mountain biking, and it had never been held in Australia before 2017. So we held a round in 2017. Took a lot of work and support from the state government and from council to actually put the event on, because it's not cheap to put on. But it gave us exposure to the whole world, and you can go anywhere in Europe or America or the Americas and pick up a mountain bike magazine or log on a website or not. You can almost guarantee that Derby will get a mention, and that's been so good for our region, the North East. But it's also been so good for the whole of Tasmania and Australia, for that matter, because a lot of people just coming to ride the bikes. And as proof of how good the trails were, and we were really wrapped in this, to be honest, they ride 8 rounds of the EWS around the world at various locations in Europe and New Zealand and the Americas, and they voted one of it. So they ride 8 trails at each round, and one of the trails at Derby in 2017 won the best trail in the world, voted by the riders. So we were pretty wrapped in that. And then we got them back. We got the EWS back again in 2019, because they only come to Australia every second year. And again in 2019, it was a huge success. 5 to 10,000 people spread over a couple of days just to come and watch the bike rides. And once again, one of our trails won the best trail in the world for 2019 as well. So that's given us a real, a lot of exposure, and we're really pleased about that. So, were there any issues?
Yeah, we can see your enthusiasm. I'm very conscious that we're going to run out of time, and there are 2 critical questions that people want to hear answered. One is, tell us about the insurance implications, always a question. No. And secondly, what's the specific role of local government in helping to foster this? From your point of view as a mayor, how can local government more help our small towns get into amazing initiatives like this?
Okay, so the insurance was just simply not an issue. So it comes under our normal public liability insurance. There was just a fractional increase in the premium, but the mountain bike fraternity accept that it's a high risk activity, and they accept the risk, and we haven't had any issues in the 5 years that we've had the trails open. So in terms of what can local government do? Well, we built the trails, basically. So Dorset Council built them. Dorset Council owns the trails, and we provide all the maintenance for the trails. And that's important because it allows us to keep the trails in the absolute perfect condition, which needs to happen to bring the people to come back to. So look, it's not easy, and we had heaps of hold-ups, bureaucratic hold-ups, especially from Crown Lands and Parks, and on issuing permits, because some of the trails are built on their land. The rest of the trails are built on state forest, in a production forest area, native forest production forest area, and it was like chalk and cheese. Once we got out on the forestry areas, well, they were so good to deal with, and we didn't have any issues from then on. But as you've got to be bold, and you've got to almost ignore the bureaucracy at times to get things done. And if you go down that path, you'll have plenty of scraps, but you'll win the vast majority of them, especially if you've got the state government who supports us, and they've been very supportive, and they've backed us in what we wanted to do, and we've ended up with a real